Tommy from DocketDrafter here, and today I'm going to be explaining how attorneys can structure their matters as files and folders on their computers to get maximum performance out of tools like Claude Code and Claude Cowork. I'm going to be going over an example as if I were a defense firm in New York State doing a lot of litigation, but what I'm talking about in this video is going to be applicable if you're on the plaintiff side or even if you're doing transactional work. On my screen on the right-hand side, I've got Claude Cowork open. On the left-hand side, I've got my Finder so we can see all the files and folders. Now, when you're using a tool like Claude Code or Claude Cowork, one of the most important concepts to understand is the workspace. So if we go down here in Claude Cowork, we're going to see that it's actually pointed at a folder on my computer. And if we back out of the ABC Law PLLC, you'll see that I've just created a folder on my desktop called ABC Law PLLC, which of course is a fictional law firm. And if I click on that, Claude can see everything in here. And so that would be any of the PDFs at the top level, any of these matters, which we'll talk about shortly, and any of the folders and files that are within the folders in the top level as well. So Claude can see all of this. And just to prove that to you, I'm going to ask Claude, what are all the matters available in my workspace? And if we take a look at Claude's output, we can see that it figured out that I've got 4 matters, which we can see here. And again, all these are completely fake cases that I made up and actually had Claude generate, but we've got the Empire Credit versus Maya Rivera, which is actually this one right here. We've got the Sterling Bridge versus Olivia Morgan, which is right here. And then the the Rivergate, which is going to be this one. And then finally the Lakeview. All of these are accounted for. And we can also see the index numbers that Claude was able to infer from the actual folder name as well. Not only that, but Claude also figured out that at the top level, we've got these 3 loose PDFs that aren't organized into matters yet. And just to showcase why this is so powerful, if you go to Claude.ai, the web version of Claude, and you ask it, what matters do I have? It's going to have no idea what you're talking about because it doesn't have access to the files and folders on your computer unless you actually upload them. Now, of course, in Claude for the web, you could go ahead and upload the file and then it would be able to figure out what you're talking about. But the issue is every time you start a new chat, you've got to continually upload these files and provide it the context that it needs. If you're in Claude Cowork or Claude Code, you can just point it at a file on your computer and kind of pick up where you left off, so to speak. Now let's actually click into one of these matters and take a look at how I've organized things. If we look at this case right here, I've got 2 subfolders. On the left, I've got drafts, and on the right, I've got source documents. In the source documents, I'm putting everything filed by the plaintiff. In this case, it's just a complaint. This is what the complaint actually looks like. Of course, this case is completely fake. I generated this 100% using Claude, but clearly it looks like it came from the state of New York, and it's got allegation responses and everything you would expect to see in a complaint in the state of New York. If we go up a level and then look at the drafts, this is where I'm putting all of the stuff that my firm would be writing. Now, of course, this is not a real firm, and I'm actually not even an attorney, but you could imagine putting all of your work in progress in this folder. So that would be your docx files, the actual Word docs that you're working on. You could even put PDFs because in a lot of cases, you need to submit PDFs to the court, and Claude can help you convert things to PDF. Let's take a look at the answer. Again, this is completely fake, but it should look like an answer, and of course, the names make it pretty easy to recognize this. If you handed somebody at your firm this folder, the ABC Law PLLC folder, even without explaining very much about where everything is and how you've organized stuff, they should probably be able to figure it out just by poking around. Claude can do the exact same thing, and of course, it can also open the files and read them and see what's going on. Now, you can organize these however you personally like. I would recommend something along these lines. The main thing that is necessary is, 1, that you're able to find your way around and organize things, but 2, you got to think about Claude as somebody who's going to be reading through these files and folders. If Claude struggles to figure out where stuff is or a lot of things are confusing, your performance is just going to be worse. And I know what you might be thinking, isn't it a pain in the ass to actually have to go in and rename all these folders and make sure all the file names are correct and everything's organized? It is, but you don't have to do that. Claude can do it. And if we actually go on the right-hand side, it's asking me already if it wants me to organize the complaints into matters. So I'll go ahead and just tell it yes. And again, I don't have to explain how I want things organized because Claude is smart enough to figure out that, well, if I've got 4 matters in the system already and they each are folders and they each have drafts and source documents, and they each have naming conventions that look like this, where the index number is before the plaintiff v. defendant, then Claude is just going to go ahead and do that without me asking. Now, of course, if you want it, and there we go. We can see that the folders just popped up magically. It was really Claude running some code on our behalf under the hood. Now, one thing that might be a little odd, and honestly, now that I'm just looking at this, as a human, it's a little annoying that there are these dashes and there's this lowercase. And the index number, while it's really nice, honestly is kind of annoying as a human. I'd rather have everything be alphabetically organized, and I'd rather have that be a little more human readable. So I'm just going to have Claude rename these folders for me because I don't really want to have to go in and rename all of them. That's error prone, and it's just not fun. So I'm just going to tell Claude, let's rename all these folders, and I'm just giving it an example like capital P plaintiff v defendant, and then the index number in parentheses. And I'm telling it I don't really want those dashes. I want this to be human readable. And Claude is actually going into the PDFs and reading the complaints so it can see the party names from the caption. Okay, and now if we take a look at the left-hand side of my screen, everything is a lot more human readable, and I didn't have to do any of that. Claude did it for me, and now we're good. Okay, so now that we have things somewhat organized, why would we even want to do that in the first place? Because just renaming folders gets old after a while and doesn't really help your clients at all. Well, let's assume, like I have in this example, that you're a firm that represents consumers that are being sued for credit card debt. So a lot of your cases are similar, and in this instance, all 7 of these cases are basically the same type of litigation, and you're representing all of them in the exact same way. Well, the Summit Ledger recovery case has a complaint, and obviously it's a different lawsuit than the Rivergate Funding Trust case, but maybe the answer that you used in Rivergate Funding Trust is actually pretty good, and all of the affirmative defenses need to get copied over, and the caption should be very similar, and the signature block should look the same. And maybe there's a few differences, especially in the allegation responses, and maybe you add or remove affirmative defense here or there. But in general, if you were even just doing this by hand, you would double-click this docx, you would make a copy of it, and then you'd probably go in and swap out some of the facts and keep the rest of the skeleton of the document the same. Claude can do exactly that for you, and because we have things organized, it's going to become very easy. So let me show you the next prompt. Okay, so I'm going into Claude and I'm telling it, let's draft an answer for the Summit Ledger case. Use the Rivergate answer as a template. Same affirmative defenses, just swap out the party names and make sure the allegation responses are synced to the new complaint. Let's see what it does. And while it's working, just notice how casual this is. There's probably some grammatical errors in here. I'm not worried about punctuation or anything like that. I just need to tell it, look at Rivergate and do the same thing for Summit, and then a few preferences that may or may not even be necessary, and that's all I need to tell Claude. Now, Claude is technically able to work with docx files. I would say it's not the ideal format. I'm not going to talk in this video about a better way to actually store your work, but just know that it could take Claude a few minutes, and that's pretty normal. Okay, Claude is finished. It's trying to display the file to me in the app itself. It looks a little weird because I have split screen going, but if we actually click on Summit Ledger and then go into drafts, you can see here that we got answer.docx and answer.pdf. Okay, on the left-hand side, we got the Summit Ledger answer that Claude just drafted. On the right-hand side, we got the Rivergate Funding Trust answer, which we use as a template. And if we take a look, it does look very similar. And we can see here that we're answering the allegations. Of course, in different lawsuits, the allegations themselves are going to be different, and there's going to be a different number of them. So we're going to see differences in the answering allegations section. But then we look into the affirmative defenses, we're going to notice that everything should line up perfectly. So we have failure to state a claim, lack of standing, blah, blah, blah. And let's just go all the way to the end where we should have 7 in total. And yeah, those got copied verbatim. And if we go on the left-hand side, this wherefore paragraph is also exactly the same. And this is the real benefit of storing your work as files and folders and giving Claude access to them. Because now, every time you create a document that you really like and want to reuse in your future work, you can just tell Claude to work from there, and it doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. And crucially, the formatting of this document was correct when we told Claude to edit it. And what that means is, if you get the formatting right once, which I've talked about in the previous video, then Claude doesn't need to fight with that every time you're making changes. It can focus on the actual text and not worry about messing stuff up or making you look unprofessional. And this is also really useful for other pieces of boilerplate. Like for here, we have the client verification. This is something where you're basically just copying and pasting the exact same thing with different names filled in, and Claude can do this very, very easily. Now, you could have Claude continue editing the document. Like for instance, you could tell it, let's add some counterclaims. It should go without saying, but if this was a real piece of legal work instead of just a demonstration, you would want to add some more detail than just let's add some counterclaims. You would want to tell it precisely what types of counterclaims you want, because this is just going to be whatever Claude thinks. And it's even prompting me because it kind of wants some direction from me. So we'll go ahead and check a few of these. And we'll see what it does. Okay, so Claude is telling us the counterclaims are added. I'm going to go ahead and open up the docx again and take a look. Okay, and we're back in the docx. We can see here the 7th affirmative defense, which if you remember from before, we had exactly 7. And now instead of going into that wherefore block, we're going straight into counterclaims. And both of these are the ones that Claude asked me about. I selected New York GBL 349 and the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act. But this is basically what you would have to do. And again, you can iterate with Claude as much as you want. You can tell it to modify things. You can tell it to reword things. In general, I would recommend brainstorming outside of Microsoft Word because, as you can see, it takes a bit of time for Claude to manipulate the Word file. If you're just looking to brainstorm, it's much quicker to just do it in the chat. And I'll also point out that it created this .tmp file. Don't let this scare you. It is a little bit annoying that Claude will do things like this, but just know that in order for it to manipulate docx files, it has to write a lot of code under the hood, and it's a little bit challenging for it to do so, so you might see some weird stuff like a TMP file or other oddities. Hopefully you're starting to realize the power of files and folders when working with Claude Cowork and Claude Code. And it's not even that you have to painstakingly organize all your past work, but even just working with Claude to get a basic organization structure can really improve the results. And not only that, it can start taking what was previously just prior work that lived in a drive or on somebody's laptop and turn it into actual firm infrastructure. Because if you have something like this, every time you work on a brief, every time you work on a new case, that becomes intelligence that Claude can reference in the future. And especially if you have things organized in files and folders, it's not like you need to go and upload it to Claude every time or tell it what's going on. It's very smart and is able to traverse the file tree on your behalf. If you're a lawyer or work at a law firm and are interested in learning more about this stuff on a more personal level, reach out to me via email. I'm going to put it in the description. I'd be happy to sit down with you and go over some of the stuff for free for 15 minutes and answer any questions you might have and just get you up to speed on Claude Code and Claude Cowork.